με τίτλο «Μοναδική λύση μας η Δημοκρατία». Για το βιβλίο θα μιλήσουν Σωτήρης Λίβας, καθηγητής μεταφραστής, Οσμάν Οστοπράκ, ερευνητής. Την εκδήλωση, την συζήτηση, συντονίζει η δημοσιογράφος Βατσιντέ Μπεν. Το βιβλίο της εκδήλωσης πωλείται ακριβώς εδώ δίπλα στον μουσικό ΙΑΝΟ. Ο λόγος στην κυρία Μπεν.
Κυρίες και κύριοι, καλησπέρα σας. Είμαστε σήμερα εδώ με αφορμή την έκδοση του βιβλίου «Μοναδική λύση η Δημοκρατία» του συγγραφέα Φαρούκ Μερτζάν. Το βιβλίο αυτό έχει εκδοθεί στα τουρκικά, αγγλικά, γερμανικά, πολωνικά και τώρα ελληνικά. Είναι εξαιρετικά σημαντικό που το βιβλίο που μιλά για την δημοκρατία κυκλοφορεί πλέον και στα ελληνικά, στη γενέτειρα της δημοκρατίας στην Ελλάδα. Το βιβλίο αποτυπώνει τον κόσμο της σκέψης του Fethullah Gülen, του μεγαλύτερου εν ζωή μουσουλμάνου λόγιου της εποχής μας. Ο Gülen αντιπροσωπεύει έναν νέο τρόπο κατανόησης του Ισλάμ στο σημερινό γεμάτο συγκρούσεις κόσμο. Με αυτό το βιβλίο, ο αναγνώστης έχει την ευκαιρία να γνωρίσει τον κόσμο της σκέψης του Fethullah Gülen. Διαβάζοντας το βιβλίο, ανακαλύπτουμε πως ο Fethullah Gülen μιλά και είναι υπέρ της δημοκρατίας, είναι κοντά στην Ευρώπη και υπέρ των δυτικών αντιλήψεων για τα ανθρώπινα δικαιώματα. Κάπου εδώ θα σταματήσω για να πάρουν τον λόγο το βίντεο, οι σημαντικοί μας ομιλητές. Πριν δούμε το βίντεο με τον συγγραφέα του βιβλίου, να πω πως ο Φαρούκ Μερτζάν είναι συγγραφέας και δημοσιογράφος και βιογράφος του Fethullah Gülen. Ζει στην Αμερική και αυτή τη στιγμή ετοιμάζει 2 βιβλία για το κίνημα Hizmet. Να δούμε το βίντεο, παρακαλώ.
Γεια σου. Καλησπέρα σας. Καλό απόγευμα. First of all, thank you, Professor Sotiris Livas, for translating this book into Greek, and thank you, Katerina Marko, for publishing the book. There is a famous Turkish poet. His name is Necip Fazıl Kısakürek. He died in 1986. When he talked to his lawyer for the first time, he said, "Have you read Socrates' court speech? Without reading this speech, you cannot be a lawyer." Why is Socrates' court speech so valuable? Before recording this short video, I read this speech again. I think there are 2 elements which made this speech so valuable and powerful: the defense of the truth and courage. A few months ago, I visited Fethullah Gülen. That day, there were a group of visitors from Greece. During this meeting with his Greek guests, Gülen said, "Greece was the door to civilizations. Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato influenced Islamic world. They became school of thoughts in the Islamic world. Greece is the birthplace of democracy, and democracy is a Greek word. But Turkey's history of democracy is not so long, and now we are in a very dark chapter." The name of this book is coming from a speech given by Fethullah Gülen 30 years ago in Istanbul. As an Islamic scholar, in this speech, he said that there will be no return from democracy, and he defended democratic values. This book is similar to Socrates' court speech. Inside the book, you will see Gülen's thoughts about Western cultures, democracy, human rights, religion and politics, minority rights, women rights, the dialogue of civilizations, and so on. Even though This book is not a court speech. The book is a testimony of Gülen's life and his universe. Recently, I saw a social media post. Someone from Turkey came to Athens, saw the book in a bookseller, pictured and shared it. A few days ago, we had guests from Australia. When they saw the Greek edition of the book, one of the guests said, "I have a Greek neighbor. Can I have this book for him?" And I gave him the book. Each book has a journey. Now this book will start its journey. Books have power to touch and change people. In the past, I visited Greece. I have been to Athens and Saloniki. Last year, as a high school student, my daughter visited your country, and when she came home, she told me this: Greece is almost like Turkey. I hope I will visit your country again very soon. Thank you. Yasu.
Πριν δώσω τον λόγο στον κύριο Λίβα, να πω πως ο Σωτήρης Λίβας είναι καθηγητής διεθνών σχέσεων στο Ιόνιο Πανεπιστήμιο, έχει δημοσιεύσει 5 μονογραφίες του, 50 επιστημονικά άρθρα, αρκετά από αυτά αφορούν την κοινότητα Χισμέτ, έχει μετάφραση και επιμελήθεια αρκετά βιβλία. Κύριε Λίβα, ο λόγος σε εσάς.
Καλησπέρα. Ευχαριστώ καταρχάς όλους εσάς που ήρθατε σήμερα εδώ. Ευχαριστώ τον Φαρούκ Μερτζάν για την ευκαιρία που μου έδωσε να μεταφράσω το βιβλίο του. Ευχαριστώ βεβαίως την Κατερίνα Μάρκου, με την οποία η συνεργασία μας πάει εδώ και αρκετά χρόνια, και τις Εκδόσεις Παπαζήση. Θα ξεκινήσω από το ότι η Τουρκία είναι μια χώρα πολύ γνωστή αλλά και πολύ άγνωστη συγχρόνως. Δηλαδή είναι μια χώρα πολύ κοντινή σε εμάς. Εννοείται έχουμε μια κοινή, με πολλά αγκάθια, ιστορία εδώ και αρκετούς αιώνες. Νομίζουμε ότι τη γνωρίζουμε, συγχρόνως μας είναι σε πολλά σημεία της εξαιρετικά άγνωστη. Αυτό το οποίο αγνοούμε σε πολύ μεγάλο βαθμό είναι η ιστορία των μουσουλμάνων της Τουρκίας. Η ιστορία δηλαδή της καταπίεσης του Ισλάμ και των μουσουλμάνων της Τουρκίας από την ίδρυση της τουρκικής δημοκρατίας του 1928 μέχρι σχετικά πρόσφατα. Αυτό είναι ένα κεφάλαιο το οποίο δεν το γνωρίζουμε, δεν έχουμε ασχοληθεί ιδιαίτερα, και ένα κεφάλαιο το οποίο έχει πάρα πολύ μεγάλη σημασία για την κατανόηση της σημερινής κατάστασης στην Τουρκία. Δηλαδή δεν γνωρίζουμε το πώς εξελίχθηκε, αυτό μπορεί να πει κανείς, νέο τουρκικό Ισλάμ από την εποχή του Σάιντ Νούρση, με την ίδρυση της αδερφότητας των Ρουτζουλάρ, και μετά με την επιρροή που άσκησε η σκέψη του Σάιντ Νούρση στον Φετχουλάχ Γκουλέν και την δημιουργία αυτής της μεγάλης αδερφότητας του Χισμέτ, μιας αδερφότητας η οποία πλέον είναι παγκόσμια. Είναι αδερφότητα, είναι οργάνωση, είναι δίκτυο, είναι κάτι σε κάθε περίπτωση εξαιρετικά ενδιαφέρον. Είναι κάτι πρωτότυπο, πάρα πολύ ενδιαφέρον, και κάτι το οποίο με επίκεντρο την εκπαίδευση έχει ταξιδέψει παντού σε όλο τον κόσμο. Ο Φετχουλάχ Γκουλέν και το δίκτυο Χισμέτ μέχρι πριν από μερικά χρόνια ήταν τελείως άγνωστα στην Ελλάδα, και όταν λέμε άγνωστα, ήταν άγνωστα με μια μικρή δόση παρεξήγησης. Δηλαδή όταν δεν μιλούσαμε για τον Γκουλέν, μιλούσαμε σαν να είναι μια μορφή συνωμότη, ένας άνθρωπος ο οποίος παρουσιαζόταν σαν μέντορας του Ερντογάν ή δάσκαλος ή διάφορα τέτοια, τα οποία δεν ισχύουν ακριβώς. Ήταν λοιπόν πάρα πολύ παρεξηγημένος, ήταν άγνωστος. Εδώ και μερικά χρόνια η κατάσταση έχει αρχίσει να αλλάζει, δυστυχώς εξαιτίας της παρουσίας πολλών από εσάς που ήρθατε κυνηγημένοι, που ήρθατε πρόσφυγες, και επειδή εμφανίστηκαν κάποια βιβλία, εμφανίστηκε το βιβλίο του Τζον Πολ, η βιογραφία του Γκουλέν, και άρχισε, εν πάση περιπτώσει, να γίνεται πιο γνωστός και στην ελληνική διανόηση και στα ελληνικά γράμματα. Το βιβλίο που παρουσιάζουμε σήμερα είναι άλλο ένα στάδιο σε αυτήν την γνώση. Όπως είπε και ο συγγραφέας προηγουμένως, ο Φαρούκ Μερτζάν, είναι συνεντεύξεις, κομμάτια από συνεντεύξεις και άρθρα του ίδιου του Γκιουλέν για διάφορα θέματα, δηλαδή για τη δημοκρατία, για την Δύση, για την κοσμικοδοξία, για τις γυναίκες, για τις μειονότητες, για τα ανθρώπινα δικαιώματα, για τους Αλεβίτες, για τους Κούρδους, για διάφορα θέματα. Αυτό που είναι ενδιαφέρον για μένα είναι το ότι υπάρχουν μέσα κομμάτια από διάφορες συνεντεύξεις και άρθρα σε μια μεγάλη πορεία ετών. Άρα αυτό το οποίο μπορεί κανείς να δει είναι και την ίδια την εξέλιξη στη σκέψη του Φετχουλάχ Γκιουλέν. Για μένα είναι πάρα πολύ εντυπωσιακό ότι η σκέψη του Γκιουλέν συνεχίζει και εξελίσσεται. Δηλαδή είναι ένας άνθρωπος ο οποίος, παρότι είναι μεγάλο σε ηλικία, συνεχίζει και προχωράει. Και αυτή ακριβώς η εξέλιξη, αυτό το στοιχείο του δυναμισμού, είναι ένα στοιχείο το οποίο χαρακτηρίζει και το κίνημα Χισμέτ. Δηλαδή ένα κίνημα το οποίο δεν είναι στατικό, είναι ένα κίνημα εξαιρετικά δυναμικό, το οποίο εξελίσσεται συνεχώς, αλλάζει συνεχώς και προσαρμόζεται στις ανάγκες της κοινωνίας, πάντοτε βεβαίως με επίκεντρο συγκεκριμένα 5 συγκεκριμένα στοιχεία, δηλαδή την εκπαίδευση, τον διάλογο, τις ανάγκες της κοινωνίας, την προσφορά και αυτό που λέμε μετριοπάθεια, δηλαδή την ανεκτικότητα, στα αγγλικά tolerance. Δηλαδή αυτό είναι ένα εξαιρετικά σημαντικό στοιχείο το οποίο χαρακτηρίζει τον Γκιουλέν και χαρακτηρίζει την αδερφότητα Χισμέτ και βεβαίως είναι ένα στοιχείο το οποίο, επιτρέψτε μου να πω, διαφοροποιεί τελείως την κοινότητα Χισμέτ από τον Ερντογάν. Δηλαδή ο Ερντογάν είναι ακριβώς στην αντίθετη κατάσταση. Είναι μια κυβέρνηση η οποία χρησιμοποιεί σε πολύ μεγάλο βαθμό σαν συστατικό της στοιχείο του λόγου της, το λόγο του μίσους. Αυτό το οποίο ξεχωρίζει λίγο την ελληνική έκδοση από τις άλλες εκδόσεις είναι ότι έχει 2 κεφάλαια παραπάνω επιπλέον. Το ένα κεφάλαιο είναι του Μερτζάν ειδικά για την ελληνική έκδοση, απευθύνεται στους Έλληνες, μιλάει ο Γκιουλέν για την Ελλάδα, ευχαριστεί την Ελλάδα για την βοήθεια που προσέφερε στους πρόσφυγες, μιλάει για την προσφορά του ελληνικού πολιτισμού και υπάρχει και ένα εισαγωγικό κεφάλαιο δικό μου για την σημερινή κατάσταση στην Τουρκία, για το κυνήγι, το αδυσόπιτο και ανελαίητο κυνήγι του Ερντογάν κατά της κοινότητας Χισμέτ, με τις φυλακίσεις, τα βασανιστήρια, τις απολύσεις χιλιάδων ατόμων, αυτό το κοινωνικό στίγμα το οποίο ουσιαστικά μπορεί να πει κανείς ότι ισούται με μια μορφή κοινωνικού θανάτου. Δηλαδή δεν είναι βιολογικός θάνατος, δεν είναι γενοκτονία, αλλά είναι μια κοινωνιοκτονία, μπορεί να πει κανείς, δηλαδή μια δολοφονία της κοινωνικής εικόνας χιλιάδων ανθρώπων οι οποίοι έχουν τεθεί στο περιθώριο και παραμένουν στο περιθώριο ακριβώς γιατί αυτό εξυπηρετεί την κυβέρνηση Ερντογάν. Τελειώνοντας, να πω ότι πάντοτε όταν μεταφράζει και παρουσιάζει κανείς στα ελληνικά ένα τουρκικό βιβλίο από έναν Τούρκο για γεγονότα που και εμείς γνωρίζουμε, αυτό παρουσιάζει μια επιπλέον δυσκολία. Δηλαδή υπάρχουν γεγονότα τα οποία, όπως αναφέρονται, μπορούν να ξενίζουν έναν Έλληνα αναγνώστη, γιατί εμείς βεβαίως τα ξέρουμε διαφορετικά. Και βεβαίως πρέπει, εννοείται, να συνεχίσουμε, εννοείται, να τα βλέπουμε όπως τα βλέπουμε. Αυτό όμως δεν πρέπει να μας εμποδίζει να μην προσπαθήσουμε να κατανοήσουμε το πώς το βλέπουν και οι Τούρκοι. Με την έννοια την εξής, με την έννοια ότι ακριβώς για να μπορέσουμε να καταλάβουμε την Τουρκία πρέπει να καταλάβουμε και το πώς βλέπει ο Τούρκος τα πράγματα και βεβαίως εννοείται να καταλάβουμε ότι η Τουρκία είναι μια χώρα, μια κοινωνία με πολλές διαφορετικές αποχρώσεις, μια κοινωνία η οποία δεν είναι μονολιθική, έχει πάρα πολλούς ανθρώπους μέσα με πολλές διαφορετικές απόψεις και βεβαίως αυτό μπορεί να μας βοηθήσει και να καταλάβουμε γιατί, παρότι είναι μια τόσο ζωντανή κοινωνία, η μονοκρατορία του Ερντογάν δυστυχώς συνεχίζεται. Αυτό είναι κάτι το οποίο πρέπει να μας απασχολήσει. Βεβαίως ξεφεύγει από τα όρια της σημερινής συζήτησης. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Κύριε Λίβα, σας ευχαριστούμε πολύ για την σημαντική σας παρέμβαση. Είναι αξιοσημείωτο να ακούγονται όλα αυτά από έναν άνθρωπο που δεν είναι μουσουλμάνος. Πριν δώσω τον λόγο στον κύριο Osman Öztoprak, να πω πως είναι καθηγητής φυσικής αγωγής Είναι ιδρυτικός μέλος και βοηθός διευθυντής της Pioneer Academy of Science στην New Jersey και ήταν διευθυντής ως το 2006. Ο Osman Öztoprak έχει προσφέρθει εθελοντικά σε δραστηριότητες διαλόγου από το 2001, ειδικά στο τουρκικό πολιτιστικό κέντρο και το Ινστιτούτο Νήσων Ειρήνης της Νέας Υόρκης και του New Jersey. Ως ακτιβιστής διοργανώνει εργαστήρια και σεμινάρια για επαγγελματίες του πολυθρησκευτικού διαλόγου και συμμετέχει σε προγράμματα διαθρησκευτικού και διαπολιτισμικού διαλόγου στις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες και τον Καναδά και είναι διευθυντής της Συμμαχίας για τις Κοινές Αξίες. Κύριε Öztoprak, ο λόγος σε εσάς.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. Papazisi's books for publications, for translating this book and inviting me to the opening presentation. And my friend Sotiris, thank you for sharing the panel with me, and Ms. Vajide for a beautiful introduction. Yes, my duty is to give you some examples from the book of what is inside and how to kind of navigate between topics in the book, because Mr. Fαρούκ Μερτζάν, first of all, did a great job of covering topics from democracy, from that to women's rights, from that to human rights, from that to minority rights. So there are a lot of topics that is posed by the Westerners and scholars to Muslims, their perceptions, and Mr. Gülen has been asked about these questions over and over again. If you read this book from cover to cover, and I realized that I was amazed that the people, journalists from different countries, from different publications, and from different backgrounds, have asked the same questions over and over again. And first question and most prominent question asked is whether Islam is compatible with democracy. And Mr. Gülen over and over again provided a convincing argument that Islam is compatible with democracy. And it's not because he thinks it is compatible with democracy, he provides proofs and evidence from the religious traditions, from Quran and Sunnah, and Prophet's practices, and practices of the other saints over the centuries. So it is not only a perception that is good, but it is also an understanding that is based on the very solid foundation of Islam. So if you let me, I'm going to go over, talk about in each subject very shortly for 15 minutes, then I will conclude. Yes, Mr. Gülen says Islam is compatible with democracy. And first he provides that in the interviews that of course there is a suspicion from the Muslims towards democracy. And one of the primary reasons that they are suspicious is that because under the countries that they live under, Muslims mostly, and one of the examples in Turkey is that it's a democracy, and many times Muslims have been persecuted and oppressed and didn't have freedom to practice their religion. And as a Muslim, practicing Muslim, if you are being persecuted and oppressed in the name of democracy, of course you're going to have a suspicion towards the democracy. It is not because democracy per se with its true notion, it is because how it is practiced upon you. And that's one of the reasons why Muslims are somehow suspicious of this. And also Mr. Gülen provides that there are examples in our Islamic history that are compatible with democratic principles. And one of them, if you look at the Islamic teaching, Islam or Muslims or any country, any state has to provide 5 basic necessities. One of them is life. Any state has to protect the life of its citizens, regardless of their religion. The second intellect and mind. That is, that the state has to provide an environment that the people should think freely and learn and educate. The third one is the religion. The state has to provide a freedom, free space for religion to be practiced. And the fourth one is lineage. That is important. That is not sometimes considered, that any state has to provide a freedom that the families and the mothers and fathers, people can reproduce, can have offsprings, can have children, babies, that so that they can, their lineage can continue. If any group is being oppressed and they cannot reproduce, they cannot have new generations, that is not an Islamic state. And the fifth one is the wealth and property. A country has to provide and protect wealth and property of all of its citizens, regardless. So when Mr. Gülen says these are in our traditions, and any Islamic state, any ruler has to protect and provide these. And when you look at the democracy, what democracy provides, and Mr. Gülen moves on. Democracy's first aim is to provide these freedoms as well. And it tells Muslims that it is in your nature that the democracy and Islamic teachings are compatible. So, the title of the book, it says No Return from Democracy. So it is a pivotal word that Mr. Gülen stated in 1994 during the opening ceremony of the nonprofit organization that he was the honorary chair of. And in the opening speech, he said there is no return from democracy. And I need to provide a little context for this, why he had to say this, and why it is so important, why it has become the title of this book. The reason is, in 1990s, mid-1990s, Turkey was going through very difficult times. There was a rise of political Islamist parties. They emerged into politics since 1960s, but they become visible and powerful through mid-1990s. And in the elections, local elections of 1994, this party, which was very small in previous years, won the 30% of the municipalities in Turkey. Can you imagine that a small party had no visibility, becoming so big that just only sweeps like the major cities and the 30% of all the municipalities? That scared a lot of people in Turkey. A lot of seculars were afraid where this country is going to go to, what's going to happen to us. And of course, it scared the Westerners, Turkey experts, Western powers. What is happening to Turkey? Is there a shift within the country? And since this Islamic party won the elections, there were talks, okay, what we're going to do with democracy. We are using democratic tools and we are getting popularity and getting votes. What we're going to do with democracy? Is it compatible? What are we going to do with this? And unfortunately, some Muslims and opinion leaders and some political leaders had the idea that the democracy is just a tool. It's a vehicle. It is a vehicle that helps you bring you from point A to point B. It is a tool. When you get to point B, which is in their mind is the power, ultimate power, then you don't need democracy anymore. So there was a debate within Muslim circles among Muslims in Turkey in 1990s. And at that moment, a respected scholar, an imam, an inspiration for so many people, an important figure comes out and says, as a Muslim, there is no return from democracy. It is not option. It is not something that you can use today and get rid of next day. It is a necessity for the country to continue. So that's why the word no return from democracy is very important. And also, another argument that Mr. Gülen provides, besides the 5 necessities that the state has to provide, they are equal to democratic principles. Another argument was that he looks at the Islam and teaching and the tradition from above. He says 98% of the Islamic teachings deal with spirituality, your faith, how are you going to conduct your life, how are you going to earn the heavens in the hereafter, morality, how are you going to interact with your neighbors. It's mostly about your life, about a person's, Muslim's life. 98% of the teaching that Mr. Gülen says. Only 2 or 3% of the teaching is about state, country, ruling, rulers. So when you look at the political Islamists, they take that 3% above this 98%. They flip it upside down, make it even look like that 3% is more important, it has more value than the other 98%. And people get confused with this, of course. And they think it is the ultimate goal of the Muslims to have an Islamic state because everybody talks about it. But Mr. Gülen says another thing that concludes everything. As long as Muslims, practitioners, can practice their religion, have a freedom of thought, can establish their religious institutions, can express themselves freely, in any government, in any country, they do not need to form a state, an Islamic state. So for Muslims to live, the state doesn't have to be Islamic. And for that, Mr. Gülen says, democratic countries are the best places that the Muslims can practice their religion because democracy provides all these freedoms. So it is another very profound statement as equal to no return from democracy, that as long as people live freely and practice their religions, they do not need to form a government. So when you look at this, many extremist organizations, groups terrorizing the world to form an Islamic state. And Mr. Gülen just says no. There is no need. For Muslims' duty is to practice his own religion, period. So I'm going to move to another topic. I'm just watching the time too because there are a lot of notes here. Another topic that is covered in the book is that, of course, there was a lot of question in the West about whether religion between religion and Islam, religion and science, whether Islam approves science or is Islam against science. And Mr. Gülen provides, like, there is like quite a few pages in this, but I'm going to say 2 things. One, and Mr. Gülen quotes this here, it says, all the knowledge comes from God. That we believe. And religion is from God. How come the 2 things that come from the same source can be against one another? They have to support one another. So for that reason, Islam for so many years, in Muslim countries, science is promoted. A lot of scientists, inventors have contributed to civilizations because Islam provided that space. The second argument that I found very important in the book is that we know that the Quran is the manifestation of God's words. It's the God's words, that's the manifestation, how we read the book. Look at the earth, look at the universe. It is the manifestation of God's power. So Mr. Gülen provides that as it is important to read the Quran as a religious person, it is also a duty for Muslims to read the universe. Because there are 2 books in front of us. The one book is the Quran, a religious book. Another book is the book of nature. But they talk about the same thing. To any effort to study the book of universe, astronomy, biology, science, medicine, physics, chemistry, anything that is going to help you understand how the universe works is no different than studying the Quran, because they're compatible. And another line that also amazes me is that I heard from him, everybody's talking about protecting the environment today. And he tells Muslims that it is Muslims' duty to protect the environment. Because as I said, if you look at these two things as the book, one is Quran, one is nature. How outraged will you be if someone destroys the book of the Quran? Correct? We will not like it. We will be enraged, right? How about destroying the book of nature? Isn't it the same book from the same God, telling a different story but completing one another? So that he says, as it is important to protect the book of God, Quran, it is important to protect the book of universe, the nature. So that is also very amazing for me. And again, on the topic of basic human rights, of course, unfortunately, many Muslim countries or Muslim majority countries are authoritarian, or if they have a democracy, it's just not fully functioning. It is just in the name, but it's just falling apart. And many human rights, basic human rights, are not provided for their citizens. So Mr. Gülen again stresses that because life and religious freedom is best preserved in democracy, so Muslims also seek for a full functioning democracy wherever they are. And also part of this democratic principle is the pluralism. It's, as we know, that because the distance between countries are becoming very smaller, because a lot of people are moving from one place to another for many different reasons. They are escaping war, they are protecting their lives, for looking for a better life. There's a huge movement of people today that has been more in numbers than in all collected numbers during the wars before. Millions of people every day, every year. Of course, the communities are becoming more diverse. And of course, there's going to be internal conflicts. But also, this is going to put people in test that how we're going to approach this mixture, new mixture. So he says, pluralism also, it is preserved within Islam. That is, if people have different culture, different dialect, different speech, different dresses, because it's their choice. It's their free will. Because Allah gave people, God gave people a free will. Someone will have blonde hair, dye their hair, dresses differently, have a different lifestyle. It's out of their free will. And respecting that free will is respecting the God's gift to the people, which is free will. So it goes hand in hand. And another is my topic before last about Islam and women. How are we doing with the time? It's good? Nice. Islam and women. And that's also the question that is asked in the West many, many times over and over again. What is the position of women in Islam? And he clearly states, and again he takes everything from the book, from the tradition, is that the women have every freedom that man has. Because if it's not, it's against the God's will. Because who created man and woman, and he who created the universe for them to live, and he who created men and women and provides and says, I'm going to reward them equally in the afterlife. So treating them on the earth separately, one better than the other, goes against the teachings. So if you look at the 14th centuries during the Prophet's time, women had every right that a man had. And if you look at Islamic history, women had right to own property, sell property, run charities. And these were the times when the place of the woman were discussed in the West, unfortunately. Whether woman had a soul, how should we treat the woman? When it was a topic, women in Islamic societies had freedom to buy houses, buy property, do trade, and Prophet's wife Hatijah was a businesswoman. She was sending caravans in today, the fleets of ships, big camels are from one place to another earning a lot of money. So unfortunately, during the practices over the years, Islam, many countries forgot their spirit. And unfortunately, it was reversed. And also he provides in the book that it was because of the people's perception of Islam's teaching and confusing that with their own cultural customs. Many times in many places, Muslims confused with the customs with the religion. And sometimes customs took precedence over religion. And over years, and it became almost a law, almost a rule, that the women should not do this, women should not be here. But it was not in the spirit, it was only practice. That's why we see different colors of Islam around the world, because everybody kind of mixed the teachings with their customs. And my last comment is going to be about on dialogue and coexistence. So Mr. Gülen himself, as a Turkish person, Turkish imam, I mentioned in mid-1990s, and it was not even no better before 1990s. There was always the conflict within Turkey among different segments of society. If you divide Turkey in different segments, from Kurds to Turks, from secular to religious, from Muslim to non-Muslims, in Alawites and Sunnis, in every segment there was a kind of a conflict between two segments. And country was divided and polarized in any issue, in many issues. And he said in his statement that only if we have a full functioning democracy that we can have peace in this country. Only way to remove the conflict, the friction among these groups is if we have a full functioning democracy, which is, again, I'm going to circle back, that is that the democracy that provides freedom to every group, freedom for them to express their opinions, freedom for them to practice their religion freely. That goes not only for Muslims, for minorities, for Greeks in Turkey, for Armenians in Turkey, for Jews in Turkey, for Alawites in Turkey. So, and he was the staunch believer of interfaith dialogue, intercultural dialogue, and since 1994, since then, he was the first one introduced a lot of minority groups in Turkey. Many of them have been sidelined, and many of them didn't have space to voice their concerns. And he was the one, he brought them together, sit around the table, and were able to talk together. So with this book is a very good read. And when I read this book, I found that if you look at the booklet that I'm holding, it says Core Values of the Hizmet Movement. So over the years, because of his teachings, Mr. Gülen inspired millions of people, and millions of people started acting, moving around, putting projects together for the purposes of that I mentioned, democratic principles, to provide freedoms for the individuals, at the same time to fight with our age's prevailing problems. Mr. Gülen states there are three major problems of our age. One is ignorance. The second one is disunity. I just mentioned that the people not looking eye to eye and talking. The third one is poverty. And if you look at any problems happening deep down, the cause are of these three. So he asked people and asked them to work in projects that targets these three problems. How are we going to fight ignorance? You're going to open schools. You're going to educate people. How are we going to fight disunity? You have to work in interfaith dialogue. You have to work and talk to other people who has different religions, different practices. You have to reach out to them. They have to reach out to you. You have to sit together, understand one another. How are you going to fight poverty? That is, you're going to start humanitarian aid. You're going to teach people how to build businesses, how to make money, how to contribute to their society. So Hizmet movement has become a transnational movement over the years, and this everything that Mr. Gülen talks in this book over and over again touches every core value in this booklet. With that, I am done, Ms. Sotiris.
Κύριε Στοπράκ, σας ευχαριστούμε πολύ για τα τόσο σημαντικά που μας είπατε. Πραγματικά γίναμε σοφότεροι. Τώρα θα ήθελα να ρωτήσω το κοινό αν υπάρχει κάποια ερώτηση που θέλετε να κάνετε στους ομιλητές. Eğer soru sormak isteyen varsa konuşmacı olan beyefendilere sorabilirler.